In this video, I'm going to cover the Paladin's Oathbreaker subclass, providing a brief description of the class, and explain how one becomes an Oathbreaker, as well as show and help set up the various features gained through this particular oath. The Paladins of this oath will generally be made up of Paladins who have broken one of their other oaths, and you will usually not be able to really start as an Anti-Paladin when creating the character, despite the fact that I'm going to for the purposes of this particular video. Now, unlike the other O's, the description of the Oathbreaker class is actually provided by the Dungeon Master's Guide, and you can gain access to it through the Classes button here as long as you actually have the Dungeon Master's Guide Players module loaded. It will show up here, and this will give you another Paladin information sheet. That is going to be slightly different than the actual Paladin sheet because most of the information here is going to be around the Anti-Paladin, even though the text itself is going to be very similar. The key active component of this particular information sheet, though, is down here at the bottom. And that's where you're going to gain access to your Oathbreaker information sheet. And the reason for that is that this oath requires a minimum of level 3 before it can be applied, which I will go in a little bit more detail a little bit later on in the video. Any paladin of any oath who has broken their oath and shifted their alignment will become oath breakers. There's no way around that. And this is why paladins try to hold themselves to higher standards, because they want to be cognizant of that, and those players who want to keep their characters as paladins and not anti-paladins will generally try to play a lot more cautiously. All of the paladins of this oath will take on an evil alignment, and this does not appear to be something that one can work around. And you can see that right here on the description page. A paladin must be evil and at least 3rd level to become an Oathbreaker. And what this means is that your character is going to shift into one of the following alignments: lawful evil, neutral evil, or chaotic evil. And it all depends on the alignment that you yourself set up with when you created your character. You can get access to those alignments through the Player's Handbook module, open up the reference sheet, and look for alignment. And then just simply look for the keyword alignment here, and you will get a summary of what the alignments are. And I'm just going to stretch this out to give me a little bit of a reference here. So anyone who started off with a lawful good or a lawful neutral alignment will shift down to a lawful evil alignment. Anyone who starts with a neutral good or a neutral alignment will shift to a neutral evil alignment. And anyone who starts with a chaotic good or a chaotic neutral alignment will shift to a chaotic evil alignment. In most cases, it is potentially possible for someone to go from a lawfully good alignment to a completely chaotically evil alignment, but those are extreme measures. In relation to how this will work within Fantasy Grounds, is that when a paladin has fallen into the Oathbreaker subclasses, they will be forced to rebuild their character using a brand new character sheet. The logic behind this is to ensure that a character does not carry forward any of their previous oath spells and features they gained with their previous oath, which is described in the section of the Oathbreaker subclass. And you can see that here. An Oathbreaker paladin loses previously gained oath spells and instead gains the following Oathbreaker spells at the paladin's level instead. These features also get reset. And you can see that here. The paladin replaces the features specific to his or her sacred oath with the Oathbreaker features. So you would eliminate any of the features you gained, say, as the Path of Vengeance, with any of these features that would match the level you are currently at. Now, as I stated earlier, this subclass requires a minimum of level 3. Some DMs might allow you to take this subclass if you have gone through levels 1 through 2 as a completely evil character, even though your alignment might not necessarily be evil. Some DMs might allow you to create a character that is already evil with the intended goal of taking the Oathbreaker subclass as you move forward. That's entirely up to that DM. I personally like to have it set up so that a paladin has to try to go through one of the good aligned or neutral aligned O's in order to actually see if they like that particular character. And then through the progress of their role playing, force an alignment shift in the sense that they then break their oaths, thereby creating an Oathbreaker. Now, as of yet, I have not had a paladin actually do that. They've realized so far that they're having fun as the aligned paladin that they're currently going through. They're not really interested in switching over to the Oathbreaker class, even though they had thought of that when they were originally trying to create their character. And I don't know what the reasons for that is. I think they generally just enjoyed the character. They seem to be having a lot of fun with their character. So as of yet, I have not had an Oathbreaker run through any campaign. Of course, I've also kind of encouraged good or neutral aligned characters and discouraged evil aligned characters because I prefer cooperation in my campaigns, not necessarily a versus campaign. Although someday I'll do one. But getting back on track, essentially, as an Oathbreaker, you have progressed through some level of your oath. In either a situation, you've been tricked in some way, shape, or form, misled in some way, shape, or form, thought you were doing good when in fact you were not necessarily doing good the way that your oath kind of dictated that you should have, or got tricked into that, you ended up falling, or your character ended up falling into breaking their oath. That means that any level from 3 through to level 20 could trigger a fall to the Oathbreaker class. And I won't necessarily say, well, it is a fall in the sense that you're going from a good alignment to an evil alignment, or a neutral alignment to an evil alignment, but it's really just a shift from whatever oath you're currently in to the Oathbreaker subclass itself. But the rules and mechanics allow you to continue your existing character through the oath that they actually want to go through or were initially set up for, and then allows the DM to essentially put tricks in place and try to trip up that particular character to see if they stick within those tenets. And I tend to try to incorporate those kinds of requirements in any campaign that I'm running through. So I'm always constantly challenging the paladin. When or if that paladin does eventually break their oath, that is when this particular character is going to have to get recreated, and all of the stats and everything can simply get copied over. So you just simply go and you create a new character sheet, and you literally just drag and drop everything, including your class over. But once you hit level 3, you start dropping the Oathbreaker features into place rather than your old oath. Everything else you just drag and drop. For example, you can drag this 18 and drop it into, well, no, I guess you can't do that because the minute you drag it out, you're actually forcing a dice roll. But anyway, you just manually populate this and then you drag everything else out. You can copy over your hit points. So 22, I have an 18 strength, I have a 11 dex, 16, blah, blah, blah. But skills, you just keep these as they were. Abilities, you copy over all of these. And anything that would be, actually, you don't even have to copy all of these because they will be applied as you level up, but you'll have to copy your languages over, you'll have to copy your proficiencies over, any traits you've got, if you've taken any features, you'll have to copy them over. And then your inventory, you just simply drag and drop the items over and manually transfer your gold, etc., etc. If you have any custom log entries, notes, whatever, you drag those over, and any spells that are oath specific you need to eliminate, but things like Cure Wounds or Thunderous Smite are generic enough that you could drag them over and not have to worry about it. But any spells that would be specific to the Oath of the Vengeance, for example, you would eliminate those from your character sheet and add in ones from here if you're going to take any of these. So that's how you would go through the process of converting a good aligned paladin into an Oathbreaker paladin, and your alignment obviously would shift to lawful evil, neutral evil, or chaotic evil, depending on where you initially started or how badly you shifted your alignment. That kind of thing. So as such, it can be a little bit more complicated to create an Oathbreaker class character, and I'm just going to release that for now. For the purposes of this video, however, I am simply going to level this character up as if I'd been leveling it through another oath, but I'm going to be making sure that I make use of all of the Oathbreaker features as opposed to the other features that would be available. And the one thing that you will note that is different about an Anti-Paladin or an Oathbreaker is they don't have any tenets. That's because you no longer have any restrictions that are in place. The whole reason you are an Oathbreaker class character at this point is because you broke something in specific to those tenets. Maybe you were trying to save a village, but either intentionally or unintentionally through that particular process, you ended up killing a handful of villagers. That's going to break your oath. And you're going to end up having to go through this particular process. So that's what happens. You've essentially broken a tenet specific to your oath. Therefore, you are now shifting to this. Now, if it's accidental, you might, and I quote the word might, get one attempt at redemption. So you might have to go through a judicial system. You might have to visit the leader of your order and they put you on a quest of redemption. And if you fail that quest of redemption, you will officially shift your oath and you will be booted out of the organization. So there are still a plethora of role-playing avenues that a DM can take to go through that particular process. And I can foresee that some of those avenues can be very interesting from a role-playing perspective and add a little bit more of a dynamic to an overall campaign. But with all of that information now sort of explained a little bit better, let's go through the process of taking a look of what happens when you start applying the Oathbreaker class and actually examine each of the features that we get as part of that process. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the Paladin class into here, and as you will see, the Oathbreaker is right there at the top. And I'm going to apply that, and technically I am now an Anti-Paladin. As a result, I have now gained access to all of these spells, and if I had been a Paladin of another oath, I have officially lost access to any other oath-related spell that I had. And you can immediately change those spells over when you actually go through and create the character, so you can drop any of those spells into this table here. But there's only going to be one other feature that you're going to gain when you start down this path as level 3, and that's going to be your Channel Divinity feature here. So let's just take a look at this. Oops, let's open this up a little bit and expand that out. So with this feature, you're gaining two abilities, really. The first is you are now gaining the ability to control an undead creature after targeting it with the Channel Divinity feature. You can control that paladin in the way that it must obey your commands for up to 24 hours or until you use the Channel Divinity feature again. And just to be clear, that also includes using Dreadful Aspect. So if you have used Channel Divinity, plain and simple, you lose control over that zombie. It will no longer respond to your commands. Additionally, if you are trying to command an undead creature who has a challenge rating that is equal to or greater than your paladin level, is immune to this effect. So you would not be able to control, say, a vampire unless it's like a greater vampire at level 3, but you might be able to control a zombie or a skeleton because I believe they had a half challenge rating. And you can always ask the DM to provide the challenge rating of any of the undead creatures on the field of battle that you happen to be near at the time that you wish to are thinking of being able to actually control it. And essentially what you'll get is a response back of, you think you might be able to gain control over these two creatures, for example, the skeleton or that zombie. But the vampire that is in the corner is just non-responsive to any form of indication that it's willing to obey your commands. That's kind of the response you'll get. In relation to the dreadful aspect portion of this particular feature, you're essentially gaining the ability to take all of those negative and evil emotions and dark thoughts and everything and just throw them into an area around you out to about 30 feet in reach. And any particular creature who happens to be within that zone will be frightened of you if they have failed a wisdom saving throw. This now means that we need to add this to our actions tab. Is it kind of contradictory that I now have an anti-paladin who's a noble knight? Oh well. So I'm going to drop this into here, Oathbreaker. And I'm going to set it up with the charisma ability here, because that is still the spellcasting control ability, if you will, when it comes to saving throws. That doesn't change. There are no other benefits of this, so we essentially, once we set that grouping, we're done when it comes to setting up this channel divinity feature. And that means that we've now set up everything that we're going to acquire for level 3 in relation to our features. The next feature you're going to gain is going to be acquired at level 7, and it is called the Aura of Hate. So with the Aura of Hate feature, you're essentially giving allies of yourself, any fiends or undead who happen to be within 10 feet of you, the ability to add additional damage to the damage rolls. And this damage is going to be equal to your charisma modifier. Now, we've already set this up in a previous video. I believe it was for the Oath of Devotion, except it was the opposite. It was for anyone who was your ally that was on the good side of things. Additionally, at level 18, the zone of influence that this occurs in goes from 10 feet to 30 feet. So anybody within 30 feet of you who is a fiend, yourself, or an undead creature will be able to gain this benefit. However, there is a restriction. A creature can benefit from this feature from only one paladin at a time, and there's a reason that statement is there. And that is because chances are, if you're an anti-paladin, you're in a group of anti-paladins. You're leading a barrage of undead, or you're leading a barrage of fiends against a group of good, or against a village. Whatever the purpose of it is, chances are there's going to be more than just the one of you. So only one paladin can apply this effect to a given creature at any particular point in time, even though all the creatures within that zone can benefit from this. It's more along the lines of if two paladins make the same Aura of Hate feature grow in the area that they're in fact, it's automatic, so that it can't really grow, then it's going to be random as to which paladin's feature applies to a given creature. So let's use two paladins. Let's say one has a charisma modifier +5. They've maxed out their charisma for some reason. Kind of ironic for someone who's evil, but anyway. And a second paladin has a charisma modifier that only gives them a +1 bonus. And there are 10 zombies that are within their sphere of influence. So let's say the two paladins are standing 2 feet from each other. That means that there is a zone approximately 32-ish feet around them, in one direction, ovalish, and 30 feet out in front and behind kind of thing. Well, any zombie that is within that zone, if they're in an area that overlaps, a DM's going to have to roll as to determine which zombie has gained a feature or gained the damage bonus from which paladin. So there's a little bit of randomness that has to happen in that play. It's not going to be able to, unless they've verbally agreed, okay, you take those 5, I'll take these 5. Then it's going to be completely random. So how do we set this up? Well, what we do is we drop this into our Actions tab, throw it under the Oathbreaker grouping, Oathbreaker, and then we add a new effect. And what this effect is going to be is called Aura of Hate. semicolon, and then you're going to go DMG colon, MG, colon, square bracket, CHA, close square bracket. It is going to be permanent, so there's no removal of how long this lasts. And you can target any creature in the area. So how does this actually work? Well, give me a second. I'm just going to set up my combat tracker. Okay, so I've set up my combat tracker, and I've switched things around just a little bit here. So I've set it up so that there are 3 zombies. A little bit unrealistic when it comes to just having 1 paladin here. But they're an ally of this particular paladin. All the other creatures here would usually probably be other goodly aligned creatures, not other evilly aligned creatures. And I'm just going to get rid of those, as well as this. So it's a bit of a not realistic combat scenario, but I'm trying to showcase a point here. Doesn't have to be realistic. So what'll happen is if Aura of Hate is now in play, technically these 3 zombies could have this effect dropped onto them. And you'll see that each of these zombies is gaining a damage modifier of 1. That's because the CHA is calculated before it's dropped into the actual creature in question. Now, if any of these zombies attack and do damage to any of these particular creatures, they will have a +1 bonus to that particular damage. Let's see, if I move that down there, let's target, say, the Black Dragon, make an attack roll. This is probably going to miss. Yep. Let's say he hit, though. Now, this zombie is getting a 1d6 +1 bludgeoning bonus just from its skill alone. So we should see a +2 bonus, and that tells me that it is working. I do see a +2 bonus on the side, because otherwise I would not be able to do 8 points of damage. I rolled 6 die of damage. So that just goes to show how this particular feature will work. And having said that, we have now completed everything we need to deal with when it comes to our feature we're getting at level 7. So let's prepare to take a look at supernatural resistance. In relation to supernatural resistance, you're going to acquire the skill at level 15, and as you can see, I've leveled up this particular character. You are going to also gain resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage from any non-magical weapon. Well, let's see if they've gone ahead and set this up for us. No, they haven't. So, this is going to be under Oathbreaker. And now what we can do is actually go through and configure up an effect for this. And we're going to want to do this. So, supernatural resistance, semicolon. And we are going to gain resist, colon, to bludgeoning, piercing. Oops, I don't think there's a space that's supposed to be there. Piercing, comma, slashing, comma, not magic. So the not here is the exclamation mark. And what this should do, and this will be on you, on self alone. What this should do is it should apply a resistance to any bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage that doesn't fall under a magic category, thereby ensuring that magical weapons will hit you, but any other weapon that you get hit with will be resisted. And if there were other resistances in here, you could actually go through and add them to this. But this is the listing that we need, and I've confirmed that this is the correct formatting. So the not is always at the end. So the item that you're not resistant to is always at the end. So you could theoretically say not silver, comma, not magic. So if you were vulnerable to silver weapons, for example, you would immediately put not silver, comma, not magic, or not magic, comma, not silver. That kind of thing. And I'll provide a link to the effects page for Fantasy Grounds, just so that you have that as reference in the description. The last skill that you are going to gain, or feature I should say, is going to be gained at level 20. And this feature is called Dreadlord. So as a Dreadlord, you are now able to cast a 30-foot zone of gloom around your person. And any bright light that happens to be within this zone will only now give off dim light. And what that essentially means is that any creature who has issues seeing in the dark will not be able to see certain creatures within this zone. Now, you're still seeing in dim light, and I'll explain that here in a moment. If any creature within this zone, which will last 60 seconds or 10 rounds, happens to be frightened by the paladin in question, so yourself, they will suffer 40-10 points of psychic damage at the start of their turn. Now, if they shake off the frightened aspect of it, that no longer applies. So they still have to be frightened, and they have to maintain that frightened state. Finally, the paladin can thereby drape themselves and any other creatures within this zone, and it's multiple creatures based on the fact that it says creatures, not creature. You can drape those creatures in a deeper shadow, so that now reduces essentially that creature to the point where anyone who looks at them can't see them. Those creatures can see out perfectly fine, but nobody can really look in, which is the equivalent of a blindness attack. So anyone who tries to attack those creatures that are draped in that shadow will suffer a disadvantage roll on their attack roll. Next, while the aura lasts, the paladin can use a bonus action on his or her turn to cause the shadows in the aura to attack one creature. So, the shadows are those that are draped around you or your allies, or someone else you've designated to be covered in that particular shadow. Any one of those shadows can be used for this purpose, and it will use your attack rolls, not the person's attack roll who happens to be draped around. If you connect with that particular attack roll, you will do an additional 3d10 plus your charisma modifier bonus of damage in necrotic damage. The last thing that has to come into play is that you can only use this once before you are required to take a long rest. Now what this means is that it is definitely something we want to add to our actions tab here. So let's go Oathbreaker. Now, it has the frightened effect here, and I honestly don't know why it's done that. I think it's just the way that it's parsed it. This skill doesn't actually apply a frightened effect, so it's immaterial for that effect to be here. However, it does do the 4d10 psychic damage, and it does do the 3d10 necrotic damage, so those two are legitimate. Additionally, you will be draping creatures in shadow, so I'm going to be adding 2 additional effects here. One is going to be a cast, and one is going to be the effect. In relation to the cast, I'm trying to take care of this requirement to make a melee attack spell or melee spell attack roll. So let's set this up. Right now, our attack is that going to use what? Okay, so that is going to use your melee attack type. And as we can see, we are gaining a +7 to the roll there. And is there anything we need to set here? So base plus, okay, so it's already taken into account everything that we can do. That is perfectly fine. Now, we aren't gaining the +3, most likely because we aren't proficient, or we are missing a bonus here somewhere. Hang on. It is a base plus proficiency plus that. No? Okay, that's legit. Oh, it's trying to do it off the charisma. That's why. Okay. So we do need to do that. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is going to be a strength attack. So this will require a change here. Okay, so that part is now done. If I need to attack something, I just roll it here. I've hit. Now I can do my necrotic damage. So that takes care of the attack roll. The modifier here isn't correct. So the bonus that comes into play is your charisma bonus. So that needs to be adjusted. There's no adjustments needed required for the psychic damage, so we don't need to worry about that. And now for the effect itself. We want to be able to grant disadvantage on any creature that attacks anyone else that we've covered with the shadow. So this is going to be Dreadlord. And, oops, Lord Shadow Cloak is what I'm going to call this. Shadow Cloak. And we want to grant attack on anyone that we give this to, and it will be for 1 minute maximum, and it doesn't expire. So now, if I open this up, I could actually drop this effect onto any one of these zombies, including myself. And what'll happen is that if somebody attacks one of these zombies, it should roll a disadvantage roll. So let me switch over to the Dungeon Master side and see if I can do that. So I'm going to set up the Succubus to attack and target, say, this zombie here, and I'm going to make an attack roll. As you can see, it is rolling 2 dice. I can confirm that it was a disadvantage roll, and you don't get to see that here, but it definitely took effect the way that it should. So this is working the way that we need it to, which means we have now completed the setup of this particular skill. There is nothing else that we need to. Oh, no, I am mistaken. There is a use requirement that we have to set up, so we just have to set that to 1 under preparation. And now we are ready to go. So if we set this to combat and actions, everything is conveniently here for us. We don't need to worry about expanding it out unless you want to look at the detailed information. Okay, and that completes everything that we need to do for this particular feature. Before I close out this video, I want to point out one key thing. While I was leveling up this particular character, I was intentionally using the class level provided by the player's handbook. And the reason for that is it simplifies how to go through and level that up. But I could easily do that by opening this up and dragging and dropping this into place or dropping it here. Doesn't really matter. Oops, there we go. As you can see, it will be the base Paladin class, and it will always be the base Paladin class because that's what you use to create the character. Oh, I just saw something there. The level up button is now there for the character wizard. I don't know if it works. I'll test that off screen. Anyway, that actually completes everything that we need to do for this particular character as an Anti-Paladin. We've leveled them through level 20. We've, quote-unquote, faked a reduction in their alignment from good to an evil at level 3 when they were acquiring their 3rd level. And that allowed me to go through and apply all of the features that were gained as part of this particular process. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to ask them in the comment section below. If you liked this video or disliked this video, click the appropriate thumb. And I hope to see you in the next video. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.